what do we have here? Time for some of my scrying. See what those adventures are up to. I see you. Researching me and my curse. You think you have what it takes to understand me, Count Strahd von Zurich of Barovia? You have another thing coming. Ravenloft, bring more wine. And find out what a YouTube viewer is. Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I've wanted to do a Music of Curse of Strahd video for a long time. One of my earliest Reddit posts, which I'll talk about in a minute, was talking about my music choices for locations and chapters of Curse of Strahd, and I'm a big fan of music generally, so choosing the music for different parts of the module for the campaign was an absolute delight. Yes, it started life as a Reddit post a few years ago now, where I went to the effort of saying, here are all my song choices, what I recommend for different chapters, different locations. For a long time I've teased about doing a part 2, but it's one of those things where the music I choice, which I'll talk about in a minute, they put out a new song every week, and going through all of that, because the post is a few years old now, I finished Curse of Strahd a few years ago, moved on to a wider Ravenloft campaign, it would be a huge undertaking. Plus, I'm still a fan of a lot of the choices I made back then. I think even though newer songs have come since, I think the songs I've chosen for the locations, they work well. So this won't be a part 2 necessarily for anyone hoping for a part 2, but I will later on, as a bonus, talk about songs that have come out more recently that could work in better scenarios and better cases. Plus, I think I forgot one minor location. Plus, I didn't like the song choice for one thing, so I changed it to something newer. So there'll be a few changes as we go through, but mostly similar to that Reddit post. All the music choices are from a musician called Tabletop Audio. His name is Tim in real life, and he's either from or based in or both New York. And I discovered the music through Roll20. It was one of the default music choices on there. Before DMing myself, I was part of someone else's game that was in person but had to move online because of COVID. And then within a month or two of lockdown hitting, we finished the campaign on Roll20, and that DM used some Tabletop Audio music choices, and I was like, oh, this is cool, this works well. So then when I then DM'd Lost Mine of Phandelver first of all, then Curse of Strahd and so on, I was like, well, I'm going to use all the Roll20 music. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to use music-only versions, which are obtainable via Tabletop Audio's Patreon. The default songs, some of them are just music, but the majority of them are music and ambience. And you might want to use music and ambience versions for your game, but I figure for the purpose of this video, it might be distracting if the ambience versions are used. That said, some of the earliest tracks didn't have music-only versions, so there might be one or two I play that do have a little bit of ambience in there, and that's the only version that exists. I want to say as well, this is no paid promotion. Tabletop Audio didn't ask me to make the video, they're not paying me to endorse them. I am just a big fan, and I'm signed up to their Patreon, and this is me almost like returning the favour, and if I can convert a few more people to be Tabletop Audio fans, then job done. I'm going to talk briefly over some of the songs, and then just kind of give my idea of why I chose it and my flavour. But, you know, ultimately, you want to hear the music, not hear me waffle on. So what I'll also do is show art and maps from Curse of Strahd, and also some art from an artist called James's RPG Art. I'm sure many people who are Curse of Strahd fans are familiar with his work. He's done a lot of landscape art of different locations. I'm signed up to his Patreon as well, the tier where I'm allowed to use animated images, and you'll see some of those sprinkled in as well. I'll go through chapter order, so start off with Village of Barovia and so on until we get to X, Y, and Z. And then after that, there'll be more general music, miscellaneous locations that don't have their own dedicated chapter, combat music, anything else I can think of, and so on. And I also realised, because I didn't run Death House for my players, because they'd already done Lost Mine of Phandelver and they started at level 5, we didn't really need to do an intro adventure, and so they arrived in Barovia and just went straight to the Village of Barovia without doing Death House. I don't have any choices for Death House. So a couple of options here could be, as you go through, there's probably some songs I play that would work really well for Death House. I mean, in the basement, it probably makes sense to use a song called Haunted, which I'll be playing soon. That's good for any sort of situation that's kind of spooky. Or jump in the comments, let me know whether it's tabletop audio or otherwise what you would recommend for Death House. I'd be interested to see your suggestions. I'm also thinking of doing a no talking version. So 2 versions of this video, one where you can hear me talk and another where I remove all the dialogue track but just keep the captions as subtitles. And that way you can just enjoy the music without hearing my horrible voice. The village of Barovia. Okay, this song is called Barovian Village. That's what Tabletop Audio called the song, and there's a few times as well I've been playing earlier on, and I used it as kind of the overall sort of campaign world map music called Barovian Castle. So Tabletop Audio knows what he's doing and names the songs to actually match popular D&D campaigns. And so you're going to have to play Barovian Village in the village of Barovia. It's got to be done. And I just really like how mournful it is. It's very minimalist. There's very little to it. And I don't mean that as a negative way. I mean, less is more, I think. The players arrive into the village of Barovia and there's empty streets and the place looks miserable. There's, a couple of people in the shop and there's a couple of people in the tavern. It's a miserable place, and I think this song works really well for it. The church Undercroft, when the lead up to the Battle of Doro, I would play something like Haunted. So they've heard this guy screaming in the basement and opened the hatch and then put on Haunted, which is just horribly spooky. And play that as the lead up to that song. And I'd recommend this for any scary situation. I think I suggest it for the coffin shop in Vallaki later on as well, before the Vampire Spawn are released. Just any situation where you just really want the players to be like, oh no, I don't want to go any further, please. Castle Ravenloft. So originally in my list, I chose a song called Vampire's Castle, but it's a little bit corny. It's got all the tropes. It's got the music in it and creaking doors and stuff, and it was a bit distracting. It was, at the time, it was all I really had. But since then, there's Court of the Count, which came out, I think, towards when I was running the end of Curse of Strahd, which I think works really well for their arrival and for the dinner. For exploring Castle Ravenloft, there's a fantastic song called Defiled Temple. And I recommend playing this music as well. I'll talk about this later, for reading the Tome of Strahd when they first receive it and read it. It's just really, how best to describe it? It's very tense, very spooky, very just awful in the sense of not an awful song, but like just makes you think of awful, miserable place. And for full effect, I'm gonna be quiet and let it play while I show different parts of Castle Ravenloft. town of Vallaki. So Vallaki as a whole, I really recommend the song Haven. It's just a really miserable sounding song. It's called Haven, which makes you think of a safe place, which kind of Vallaki kind of is, sort of, or when they first arrive they might think it's a safe place, this walled town, but there's something just really miserable and melancholy about it. The fun fact, the original version with the ambience is the sound of rain. So what you could consider is having the original version play during the festival when there's a massive downpour that puts out the fire and ruins the festival, and then use the music-only version for most of the rest of the time. I'd even suggest having it in the Blue Water Inn, so instead of just putting on cheery tavern music when they go in the Blue Water Inn, continue to play Haven. And just so that miserableness, is that the word, continues throughout. For exploring some of the places inside Vallaki, such as the Burgomaster's Mansion and Walk the House, I really like a song called Mansion Night. I recommend the music-only version because the original has the sounds of creaking doors and footsteps, so you might want to just have the music-only version for that. The coffin shop, maybe when they've gotten their way in there. As I said earlier, I recommended Haunted. I'm not going to play that again. For the Vistani camp, I'm a big fan of a song called Russian Winter for the Vistani. I think this is another one that doesn't have a music-only version. It's just got the sound of like outdoors, cold, wind, beautiful kind of, that kind of style song, whereas there's also a woman vocalist singing quite mournfully. I think it just works perfectly. I know there's some people who with Vistani like to play kind of more cheerier music, but there's just something that works really well with this song, and anytime there's an encounter with the Vistani, whether it's with Madame Eva's camp or Aragon and Luvash and their camp outside Vallaki, I really like playing this song. It's sort of like an extra song, depends on the circumstances in your game. If Lady Wakta's coup is successful and she takes over as the Burgomaster, there's a song called Burning Village that I played that anytime they went after Lady Wakta took it over. I just thought it worked really well. The old Bonegrinder, the windmill with the hags, there's a song called Abandoned Windmill. The music-only version probably works better here because I think the ambience version has the sound of a windmill turning, and I think it says in the description for the old Bonegrinder that the windmill doesn't turn unless the hags turn it manually, so it's not a windmill that's always turning. But it's just something, it just works really well. I think I played it when they went to the old Bonegrinder and arrived and were first talking to the hags before the battle kicked off. Argynvostholt, there's a song called Haunted Ramparts, which works really well because it's a sort of ruined manor slash castle. It's not really a castle, is it? But you get what I mean. It's kind of with the knights there. and especially with things like the roof and all the stuff on there. And it's just, they're revenants, they're like ghost knight sort of things, zombie ghost knights, and I just thought that worked really well. Krezk. So there's two parts of this. There's the village and the abbey. For the village, I chose Rainy Village, and I feel this works really well. I said Haven earlier for Vallaki, but Rainy Village just works really well, and it's quite sorrowful. There's almost like a glimmer of hope and a glimmer of peace that, you know, these people are living in this small community and they're getting by and that kind of thing. They're a bit nervous about that abbey up on the mountain, but for the most part, they're peaceful. Maybe not happy, but they're peaceful. Unless obviously things go wrong, like the mongrel folk start attacking or what have you. And then for the abbey, there's a song called The Orrery, which sounds very sort of monasterial. Is that a word? It sounds like monastery type music, basically, which is perfect for the abbey, I feel. And it feels quite creepy. It feels quite not quite right. And so I think that just works really well for the abbot and the mongrel folk and everything going on there. For Tsolenka Pass and Mount Gakis, there's a song called Ice Throne. I think the original has like a wind sound throughout, which works perfectly because obviously it's going to be very high up in the mountains, wind blowing, cold. I think that works really well. For Berez, I really like Barren Wastes. There is a song called Salt Marsh, and Berez is a marsh, but I recommend that for something I'll get to in a minute. Barren Wastes is really cool in that it's almost sounds, there's some of the sounds almost makes it sound a bit like sci-fi, which I know obviously it's a fancy setting of a sci-fi setting, but there's just, because of Baba Saga's nature, and the scarecrows come to life and the huts come into life as they're exploring Berez. I don't know, I just feel like Barren Wastes works better. For Van Richten's Tower, I struggled with this one. And then there's a song I play just when there's times when they're kind of investigating, or I don't know what else to put on, called Noir Procedural. Now, I've played it quite a few times and it's never been an issue, but I did realise that it's, I think, intended for more sort of like modern day fantasy games and modern game TTRPGs. And I think there's a really faint sound of a police siren, but it's so faint I had to really listen out for it, and I don't think my players ever noticed. They never said anything. So I think it kind of passes as music you could play in something like a more traditional D&D game or in Curse of Strahd, but just be mindful of that. But it's just something that's quite, when they arrive at the town, they're investigating, how does this door work, and, trying to figure out how to go inside. I just thought it worked really well. Wizard of Wine's Winery. This is where I used Salt Marsh, which I mentioned before, and it just sounds really miserable. I would recommend a version without there's just music, because the ambience does sound like a marsh, and obviously it's not a marsh. But when they first meet the Martikovs, who are being sort of ousted from the winery by the evil druids and the blights, I just think it works really well. It's miserable and just works. It's very Barovian. Works really well for the winery. I think there's a night variant, which I don't think I've actually listened to, so you might want to check that out if you sign up to Tabletop Audio's Patreon and have a listen. Amber Temple, I used a song called Sleeping Ogre, the music-only version, so you don't have the sound of a snoring ogre. There's only so many songs. Defiled Temple, which I mentioned earlier for Castle Ravenloft, could probably work really well here. But I wanted to save that for Castle Ravenloft and wanted something different here, and I just thought Sleeping Ogre is very suspenseful, very tense kind of song, and I just thought it worked really well. Yester Hill, there's a song called Druidic Hilltop. Perfect. I'm not going to say any more. Hear for yourself. And for the Werewolf Den, there's actually a song called Wolf Pens, and the original song has the sound of wolves in it. I think I used the music-only version for that, which worked well, just because it's quite suspenseful, quite tense, like a lot of the songs I've probably recommended, but I just thought it worked really well in that location. And that's all the chapters, all the locations. I'm now going to talk about non-chapter locations, such as those that aren't specific to a chapter, obviously, and those that are listed in, I think it's Lands of Barovia chapter, where it's multiple minor locations. So sort of the general theme music of the campaign, and when they were travelling on the Svalich Road and I showed them the Barovia map and they're travelling from point A to point B, I used Barovian Castle, which is what I would call sort of Curse of Strahd theme music, if you will. It's not Strahd's theme music, I'll get to that later, but I think it works really well as the sort of main music overall. And I'm playing the music, I played the music only version earlier and I'm playing it again now, but having just like the ambience in that one is very subtle and just like bursts of thunder and things like that, so that works well. My players never travelled at night. I think I probably would have just used Haunted, but use that, or drop a suggestion in the comments of what you use for nighttime travel in Barovia. Surpool encampment, as mentioned when I mentioned the other Vallaki camp, Russian Winter, but then also for Madame Eva's card reading, I used one called All Hallows Eve, which is obviously quite Halloween-y. I think it just worked really well for when they're inside the tent getting the card reading done. I think it's one of the songs that Tabletop Audio did that's like a Halloween special. See what you think. Lake Zarovich. I actually forgot to include Lake Zarovich in my original list. I'm pretty sure I just used Alvin Glade. Just kind of the serene, peaceful kind of music. I know it's obviously not peaceful what happens on the lake, but it probably is when they first arrive there and just see this person on this boat in the middle of the lake when they first get there. And if the Mad Mage encounter, I don't know what I used or what I'd suggest for the lead up to the Mad Mage, but once he invites them back to the Magnificent Mansion, there's a song called Wizard's Tower that works really well. It feels very sort of traditional D&D actually, that, and don't know, see what you think. Let's move on to combat. So there's quite a few songs you can use for combat, and I tend to cycle between the songs Skirmish, Field of Heroes, and Cry Havoc. They're all quite early songs of Tabletop Audio's. Skirmish I would only probably recommend for easy battles, like an easy random encounter. If they encounter somebody, roll on the random encounter table if you're doing it random and they get something quite small now, a higher level. I'd also recommend it only for like a melee heavy party, or if the enemies are all weapon users, because it's the sound of clinking swords and that kind of thing. Sounds like a big battle. Might not work if you've got something else. And then Field of Heroes is what I've been playing while I've been talking about this. This works really well for Barovia because the music sounds very sort of tense and plays in kind of like bursts. I think it would work really well for, say, scarier boss battles, mini boss battles, or if it's an encounter they might struggle with, such as if they're low level fighting werewolves and they haven't got much magic or magic items or silver weapons. I really like Cry Havoc as well, which I won't play, but you can check that out yourself if you wish. For the battle with the Night Hags, I would recommend Witch Mountain. There's just some sort of really sort of spookiness to it that I just think works so well for just the hags in particular. I think I also used it for when I played Lost Men of Pandelver, for the sort of final boss music in that. Just works for certain battles really well. And now for Strahd's theme and for the music, I played for any battles with Strahd except for the final battle. For the Vampire Spawn, any battles Vampire Spawn that aren't Doru, so for instance the Coffin Shop, the ones in the Amber Temple, anything like that, I played Terror in the Woods. Now Terror in the Woods is designed as a wolf encounter, I think, because if you listen to the non-music only version, the original version, there's sounds of wolves in it, and the picture on Tabletop Audio shows like a silhouette of a wolf. If you take out the ambience and just have the music only version, I think it works really well for Strahd. But I would not recommend the regular version for Strahd because, you know, Strahd appears and then his wolf sounds is a bit weird. So a few miscellaneous choices. For the Skeletal Rider encounter, I chose a song called Dark Continent. This is the encounter that's on the random encounter table. They're traveling Barovia, where there's this just Skeletal Rider that I think just rides past them unless they attack it. I thought that song worked well. For reading the Tome of Strahd, I won't play it again, but the music-only version of Defiled Temple works really well. When I read the Tome of Strahd, plus gaps for like talking about it, it lasted exactly 10 minutes. And it was perfect. It ended just as I finished reading it and read the last few words of the Tome of Strahd to the players, because it was read out to them by an NPC. It just worked so well. I mentioned Noir Procedural earlier for Van Richten's Tower. I would suggest that for any kind of general exploring, investigating. There's also another great song called Thieves Guild that works really well in that regard. And there's a stealthier version that you can get via the Patreon that also is like an alternative version that just sounds a little bit quieter, a little more hushed, hence stealthier. And then for any general spooky situations, as I mentioned earlier, I'd recommend Haunted. And now onto some bonus songs. These are some songs that came out after I did my original list. Since my original list, there's two songs he's done, one called Court of the Count and Vampire, that just work really well. You might want to use either of those for Castle Ravenloft, whether it's the dinner, or for, obviously speaking of the dinner in terms of the mod where it's more of a diplomatic meeting, not the one where it's in the book where it's a trap and they're trapped in the castle. But you might want to use one or both for exploring the castle. I think Defiled Temple works best, but you might want to use one of those instead. Check them out. And more boss battle music, again, I'd probably recommend the music-only versions. Escape into Shadow is great. I played that, I think, for a couple of bosses. And then Dragon Rider as well came out more recently. And a really good one as well that came out after, which I think works really well as an introduction to Curse of Strahd, is called Wagon Ride. It sounds quite tense, sounds quite scary, and you could use this, if you use the music-only version, it takes out the sound of the wagon. This could be for if the mists take them away and they arrive into Barovia and they're not sure. And then if you use Barovian Castle, I've suggested for the theme music, they're the same key. So you can transition from one to the other, from Wagon Ride to Barovian Castle really well, like I've just done. And first time I played Barovian Castle for my players was that when they arrived, they found the note on the dead body, I forget whose name it is, the sort of undelivered letter, and I think as they read the word vampire or vampire, that is when I hit play and the music started playing. And to go from, I didn't have Wagon Ride then, so I think played some other music. I think it was called Ghost Town, which is also really good. But if I were to do it again, I would do Wagon Ride into Barovian Castle. It works really well. And that's my list of tabletop audio songs for Curse of Strahd. Let me know what you think. Would you use different songs instead? Would you use different music instead? I actually, as well, wanted to just mention a few alternative names. If you didn't want to use tabletop audio, you want to use tabletop audio in addition to other people. There is a person called, really sorry if I mispronounce your name, Travis Savoy. I really hope I got that right. Who has done a playlist of music, especially for Curse of Strahd and for different locations. I know some people who rave about his music, and I'm pretty sure it's available on Spotify. And then another Roll20 built-in version is a person called, their sort of stage name, if you will, is Incompetech, but their real name is Kevin MacLeod. I play a lot of Kevin MacLeod's music as well as tabletop audio in these videos, so if you check out some of the videos, you might have heard some of his music. Some of his songs are even played by really big YouTubers. One of my kids was listening to this Minecraft YouTuber who's got like thousands, if not millions of subscribers, and I recognised one of his songs being played, which was pretty surreal. And obviously not a very Barovian song, and more just like a kind of more like one of his more light-hearted, sillier songs. But some of the music there works well. I remember there being a cello piece that I think I played for Cloven Bellevue in the Abbey in Krezk. Things like that. You might be able to find a few songs that work really well as well, or instead. And that's it for this one. Usually for my outros, I say next video is coming up. But to be honest with you, this video is very different to the videos I usually put out. I think it's going to be very difficult to edit and take a long time. So I'm not going to do that this time, because I don't want to say next videos are this one and this one, and this one ends up getting pushed back and the videos it mentions are actually published before it. So all I'm going to say is, if you want to see some more videos, please subscribe, please hit the bell icon or whatever they say. Feel free to mine my old videos. At this point, putting this video out, I've done about 30 videos. Half of them are Curse of Strahd, half of them are Ravenloft. There's some playlists where you can have a flick through. I give some general advice. I have some controversial opinions about some Curse of Strahd stuff. My controversial 3 videos. Please feel free to check them out. And thanks very much. Thank you, Miss Wanderers.